In this video, we'll adapt the code we wrote in Runtime Code Loader to the empty mod we made in the last video. The code we wrote doesn't really hold up on its own. We want this to run when the hero casts the Raise Dead spell. We'll also have to mess with the timing a bit too, because I don't think the summoned creatures are spawned as soon as the spell is cast. Rather, they pop in a second after it lands. The first thing we need to do is detect when the player casts the spell. To do this, we'll use something called MessageEvents. A message is posted whenever certain things happen. MessageEvents lets us access these messages. Messages are posted from and to entities, however this doesn't affect whether we can see them or not. We can see all messages when they're sent. What we're going to do is continually check for a message of type emessageType.MessageEventCreatureCastSpell to be posted, sent specifically by the hero. To do this, we can call either MessageEvents.isMessagePosted or MessageEvents.isMessageSentBy. The difference is that isMessageSentBy lets us immediately see if the hero was the one who sent the message. But even if we use isMessagePosted, we can still check if the hero sent the message, as who sent the message is stored in the message itself. You may think that isMessageSentBy would be ideal to use in this situation, as we only want to affect the hero's summons, right? Wrong. We also want to track the henchman's summons. I guess we could call isMessageSentBy twice, once for the hero and once for the henchman, but something tells me that may be unnecessary and potentially less efficient. So let's use isMessagePosted. isMessagePosted returns two values, the bool and the message. The bool is whether or not it was posted, and the message was the message object that we can obtain important information from. isMessagePosted doesn't just take the type of message to check for, it also takes the ID of any message you want to ignore. Why would you want to ignore a message? Well, you can actually receive the exact same occurrence of a message multiple times. This is because messages don't disappear instantly. They hang around for several seconds. If you were to try and receive a message of a certain type on one tick and again on the next tick, you will end up receiving the same message twice. By passing the ID of the last message we received, the game will ignore it if it's identical. For this reason, we'll be storing the ID of the last message we received so that we don't have our script thinking the hero cast the spell multiple ticks in a row. The message object can tell us a bunch of things, including who sent the message, so we can simply retrieve it with the getEntitySentBy function and compare it to the hero and henchman entities like so. I'm going to add a message that will display when the hero casts a spell. And while we're at it, I'm also going to quickly move the code we wrote into our main script, but I'll comment it out for now. Let's test this in-game. To reload our code, we can use Runtime Code Loader to call codeloader.modmisc.reloadMod and pass it our mod's name ID. If you're trying to call reloadMod from your own mod, this will just be modmisc.reloadMod without code loader. Well, the mod has reloaded, but nothing happens when we cast the spell. Oh, it's simply because I don't call the function. This function will be used to detect when the hero casts a spell, rather than act on that information, so we also want to return a bool. And there we go. We can tell when the hero casts a spell, however we do need to know what kind of spell is being cast. Conveniently enough, messages contain something called extra data. What the data represents depends on the type of message. Let's take a look at the extra data we received by calling getExtraData as number from the messages meta table. We received 7. What does it mean? Well, it's probably a value corresponding to an entry in an enum. This is the kind of thing you'll have to intuit yourself. In the case of CreatureCastSpell, it's the spell's value in the spell type enum. Looking at the enum, 7 is Raise Dead. So, we can compare the extra data number with eSpellType.SpellDeadRising. Let me unlock another spell and we can test this. Oops, I accidentally left in a function that caused an error. Since our mod has encountered an error, the manager has stopped it. We can't reload our mod, as it isn't loaded in the first place, but we can simply tell the manager to reread the installed mods, and it'll see it's not running and try to start it again. Yep, Now the script recognises when the hero casts a Raise Dead spell. It's time to adapt our code. I'm going to cut it up into separate functions, one to check if the hero casts the spell, one for destroying nearby default summons, and one for destroying our summons. Alright, I'm also going to quickly set up the onDisable and onUninstall functions, which will clean up our mod. In onUninstall, I'll call the Destroy Custom Summons function to clean up. OnDisable will also destroy the summons. I'll be modifying this later as the mod expands, as being disabled will essentially freeze our mod in time, and as we're about to get into timers, you'll see why we'll need to clean up. Back to the main part of the script. Like I said earlier, we actually have to wait a second after the spell is cast before we can detect the spawned creatures because they don't exist yet. There's two things we can do here. We can either use script function .wait for time in seconds, or we can use a timer. Wait for time in seconds is blocking, so our coroutine will pause completely for the duration. It's easy to use, but we can't do anything in the background. Using a timer will let us be more flexible, so we can do other things while we wait, but we'll have to constantly check our timer and act once the timer lapses. I'm going to use a timer. We need to be able to react if the player recasts the spell while we're waiting. Side note, we can have multiple coroutines, so it'll still be possible for our mod to do things while one thread is blocked, but it's generally more of a hassle, and potentially more error prone. Anyway, the idea is to use a bool and a timer to track whether we need to do something. When we receive the spellcast message, we'll set the bool to true and set the timer to 3 seconds. But at some point I can change that to extend current summon lifespan. We'll also despawn any of the summons we made. In the background, we're going to continuously check to see if the bool is true. If it is, we will check the timer to see if it's hit 0. If it has, we'll then set the bool to false and jump into action. We'll despawn the default summons and spawn our own in their place. We can then set another bool to true and start another timer that tracks how long our summons last. We'll use the same logic, but instead we'll despawn our summons when the timer hits 0. Alright, I don't expect this to work first try, and we'll probably encounter errors or even a crash, but that's part of the process. Nice! I'm going to quickly add some verbose debugging so we can track certain things within the script to see what it's doing. I'll add 1 or 2 units to the up axis of the hero's position flogging because it's hard to see as it is now. Much better. Sometimes I'll use a variable for the log message. The coroutine will set it when it hits various points of execution. That way the coroutine can say what it last did. If it crashes the game, I'll know which section of the code caused it. Anyway, obviously it's a bit bare bones. We can also create particle effects and attach them to our entities, but it's relatively easy, so it could be a challenge for you if you're looking for one. Anyway, one annoyance is the timing. We'll have to account for the spell level, as for each extra summon we'll have to wait another fraction of a second for them to spawn in. Casting directionally also takes longer for the spell to land, so we'll have to add an extra half second or so for that. We also want to track the cast level to adjust the summon's lifespan. That's fine though, we can do that. I originally thought we had to use a function called spellmanager.getCurrentChargingSlotIDX, which was extremely jank and basically gave out random numbers. Thankfully, I found a table called Player Spell Manager, and it contains mostly the same functions, but they actually work. We can also use playerspellmanager.isTargetedDIRCastMode to see if the player is casting directionally to account for that extra delay. I'm going to make the spawn delay base 1.5 seconds with 0.2 seconds per level and a flat 0.3 if casting directionally. I've already messed around with this before, and this is pretty tight. Okay, wait. At this point I forgot to add the additional timing to the 1.5 seconds. I did fix this later, but just imagine the line looking like this. Now that the mod's mechanics are pretty much finished, it's a good time to do another pass for onDisable. I don't really need to do anything to persist in between the mod being disabled and it's enabled, as our summons won't survive that long anyway, so I'll just try and reset everything. I'll set all timers to 0, set the bulls to false, and destroy the summons. Let's try disabling and enabling the mod to make sure nothing's retained. As of this video, there's no function that's designed to be called from your mod to do this, because it's not really something your mod should be doing. But with the runtime code loader, you can call codeloader.modmanager.disable or enable and pass the function the mod's name ID. Uh-oh, this is the manager's fault. I haven't tested enabling and disabling that much, so bear with me. I'm back, fixed that, I think. Alright, now the manager is simply not calling onDisable. Wonderful. Back in a second. Finally, it's working properly now. I would expect you to encounter things like these while you're working on your mod. The manager is still very work in progress. Those 2 bugs only took me a minute to find and fix though, so please tell me if you encounter something like this and I'll fix it. Okay, that's all I'm going to do for this video. There's certainly more I can add, as the summons don't follow you around, though I don't think that's much of an issue. I want specific NPCs to be spawned based on charge, or even based on unlocked spell level with charge simply scaling the lifespan. I'd also want XP to spawn when the summon hits an enemy. I'd do that using one of the MessageEvent hit messages and checking if one of our summons was the sender. In the next video though, I'll cover adding our own menu to the mod configuration menu, which will let people configure and interact with our mod from within the game.